This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock p.m. If you could mute your microphones, I do have the ability to do that on my end if it gets to be a problem, but we'll try it that way, and that allows you to unmute at your time. Welcome tonight to the UW Kegonsa Research Campus Solar and Agricultural Research Project Draft Environmental Impact Assessment Public Meeting. It's March 24th at 7 p.m. and we will begin the meeting at this point. My name is Ben Piotr. I am the project manager for Ayers Associates. We are the responsible party for the development of this meeting. If I can, so the meeting agenda tonight, I'll introduce the project and the process that we're going through. It's called the Wisconsin Environmental Policy Act process, or WEPA. Josh Arnold from the UW-Madison will help to describe the project. I'll describe briefly the alternatives that are required to be analyzed as part of WEPA and the project schedule, the potential impacts that were developed in the draft environmental impact assessment report. Towards the end of the meeting, we'll open up the comment period for the public comment on this project, and we'll close the comments at that time. So the attendance is being recorded tonight. There is also a virtual meeting sign-in. I have staff that are taking names if you've signed in through the appropriate protocols for the GoToMeeting webinar tonight. There's also allowed written comments through emails if you have any other comments before the evening's over. And feel free to send those outside the time limits of this meeting. The public notice was noticed in the Wisconsin State Journal and the Stoughton Courier Hub on Wednesday, March 10th. And it was also emailed through a distribution list that has been developed for the project for interested parties and area potential folks and government agencies. The draft environmental impact assessment report and public notice is posted on our website as well. Again, the meeting's recorded. Following the meeting, minutes will be developed and posted on our website, as well as potentially hosted on the UW's website. And EIA team members and design team in attendance this evening. UW-Madison is in attendance, Gary Brown, the campus planner and WEPA coordinator, and Josh Arnold, the campus energy advisor. Ayers Associates, again, I'm Ben Piotr. I'm an environmental manager here at Ayers. I saw Logan Seipel, who's one of the authors, is also in attendance tonight. From the development team / owner of the solar array system, Alliant Energy, I saw Andy Ellert is in attendance tonight. And then Sunvest Solar is a project developer. John Doherty, one of the project leaders, is also in attendance this evening. So the draft EIA meeting purpose this evening, I'll describe what the Wisconsin Environmental Policy Act is and how it applies here, as well as the environmental impact assessment process. I'll describe the proposed project, alternatives, and schedule, discuss the potential project impacts that were identified in the report. We'll then open it up for comments. Upon closure of the meeting tonight, we'll share these comments with the design team for consideration in the design process. And I wanted to note that this is a self-contained process. It does not in any way get into permitting for the project or any associated other requirements that the design team and owner team will need to still navigate through that is described in the schedule coming up. Finally, any appropriate comments and input will be incorporated into a final environmental impact assessment document, and as well as potentially the finding of no significant impacts. So the project site is located about a half-mile west of Lake Kegonsa in the town of Dunn. It's situated between McFarland and Stoughton. It's located on a 280-acre approximate UW-owned parcels, and the site itself consists up to approximately 15 acres for the solar array, as well as support areas for the array, such as driveway access and general access for maintenance. These pictures were taken in February of the project site. This is a location of the general project site looking south. You can see south of the site, there's fairly good screening from trees along, and you see also the east side of the site. This is a picture of the project site looking to the southwest from the Kegonsa Research Campus Physical Sciences Lab facility along the fence line. Again, you can kind of see some of the trees that are screening some of the site itself. Along Schneider Drive facing south, you see on the left side of the photo is one of the research campus buildings from the science lab. And the property generally slopes from north to south. This is towards the southern end of the project site looking north. Again, you can kind of see the left and right sides, there's a tree line, and that'll be apparent in another aerial view of the potential solar array coming up. Another project view is facing northeast. In the background, you can see there is an elevated ropes course. In the background, you can see those long poles, kind of giving you some vantage point of where you may be looking on vantage in accordance with the site location. The Wisconsin Environmental Policy Act was established in 1971 in the state of Wisconsin and adopted by UW System Administration in 1981 with further revisions in 1999. This followed closely the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, and the purpose is to evaluate environmental effects of a project. And these are specifically projects that use state funds or are located on lands owned by the state of Wisconsin or their similar type governmental agencies, such as the UW. So the major steps in the process, so the UW System Administration and UW-Madison determined that this site, since it's owned by the UW, needed to have an environmental impact assessment done, which is a type 2 action. So a scoping letter was issued on February 10th, and one comment was received from the town of Dunn. During that time, in parallel with that, we began preparation of the draft environmental impact assessment report. This report was released for a minimum 15-day public comment period on March 10th, and the comment period concludes this evening. The draft public meeting is located at the termination of this 15-day public comment period. Other major steps looking ahead here, the Board of Regents has a meeting on April 7th and 8th in which they will be voting whether to generally approve moving forward with this project. Upon conclusion of that meeting, if that meeting does approve this project continuing to gain momentum and associated necessarily permits that would need to happen in the future, the final environmental impact assessment report would then be evaluated and appropriately assessed if it needed to be elevated to environmental impact statement, which is a more publicly robust process with further public engagement opportunities. If that is not deemed required, then a finding of no significant impact would be prepared in conjunction with the final EIA report. And at that point, the process for WEPA would be terminated. The draft environmental impact assessment report was made available at the McFarland Library, the Stoughton Public Library, as well as made it available on our project website. It's still there. Probably the easiest way to get there, if you want to jot down a quick address, is www.ayresprojectinfo.com. That airs project info. And through that, you'll find another link to the project landing page. It's also hosted on the UW-Madison project website, which is independent of the WEPA process. This is located, again, at the final slide, so don't feel you have to write down this entire address. And we will probably provide a link to this address from our website as well, just so upon conclusion of the EIA process, there is another link for interested parties to continue to evaluate and review what is going on with this project. So the project description, I'm going to hand the mic over to Josh Arnold at this time. He's a UW project coordinator, helping to facilitate from UW's end this project. And Josh, just let me know when you'd like to forward the slides.
Sure, you bet, Ben. Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who's attending tonight. We appreciate your time and your interest in this project. As Ben mentioned, my name is Josh Arnold. I'm with the UW-Madison Office of Sustainability, and our office is working with other campus units to help identify different locations on our main campus at UW-Madison and at different properties that UW-Madison manages on behalf of the Board of Regents located throughout the state of Wisconsin. And looking at these different properties and opportunities to develop a clean energy portfolio for campus and that is based on sustainability goals that our institution has that I'll get to in a moment. Before I get into that, let me just acknowledge that we have members of our proposed project team on the call tonight. As Ben mentioned, representatives from Alliant Energy and Sunvest Solar as well, who would be available at the end of our discussion to address any specific questions if any come up. Ben, can we go to the next slide, please? Briefly about the need for this particular project, as I alluded to earlier, our institution is part of a network of colleges and universities around the country and around the world that are looking at their environmental impact and looking at opportunities to develop clean energy that makes sense for our constituents on campus, for our local communities, and for our students. We feel like this project in particular has a real opportunity to enable our institution to help meet some of our goals, not only for our clean energy goals, but also for our institutional learning and research goals by combining the development of a solar array with agricultural and horticultural research opportunities. And that's why when we're referring to this project, we talk about it not only as a solar project, but as an agricultural research project as well. There are lots of questions out there about the impacts of solar arrays on agricultural land, and there's a significant need to research these types of studies, ranging from soil sciences, vegetative covering, pollinator habitat, what types of animals that might be able to be used to manage vegetation, in addition to what types of crops or other plants might work best with solar arrays. There's no question that Wisconsin is seeing a great number of solar projects that have been proposed and have been developed, and this question isn't going to go away. It's part of our job at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, not only to develop a clean energy portfolio, but to do one with the Wisconsin idea front and center. We feel like the opportunity to combine solar development with agricultural and horticultural research provides the real key to unlocking our institutional mission and providing value for our faculty, for our students, and for our stakeholders. In addition, with this particular project, as Ben mentioned earlier, we are working with Alliant Energy on this project, and a project like this contributes to decarbonizing the electric grid, which is a key component of Alliant Energy's clean energy blueprint. Ben, if we could go to the next slide. So briefly about this specific project, and as Ben mentioned, this project would be located at our Kegonsa Research Campus. The total campus is roughly 280 acres of agricultural land that's currently leased and leased for farming. This particular possible location that has been identified is up to 15 acres that is tucked away in the interior of the parcel. And that was, as we'll get into a little bit in some of the next slides, we chose this area very specifically to minimize impacts on the view shed of the area, minimize impacts on prime agricultural soil, as well as minimize any types of interference that might go on from anyone driving by on any of the nearby roads. As I've also mentioned, the intention here is to co-locate this with agricultural research, horticultural research, as I mentioned earlier, about soils and plants and various aspects like that. The total solar project would be roughly 2.25 megawatts, and that would generate enough electricity roughly to power about 600 homes or so, give or take. Ben, if we could go to the next slide, please. So as we see here, the proposed solar array would be developed in partnership with Alliant Energy. Alliant Energy would be the developer of the project, and UW-Madison would lease the land to Alliant Energy. Alliant Energy would, working with Sunvest, would build, own, operate, and maintain the solar project. And at the end of the solar project's useful life, they would also decommission the project and return the land to a state that is suitable for future projects or future agriculture. And you can see this approximate budget amount is just based on average costs for solar in the area, and is not necessarily the specific amount. We're still in the process of developing some of the specifics on this project. And Ben, if we could go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about some of those aspects. What you see here on this slide is an overhead view of just a sample rendering of what the project could look like. This is not a final design by any stretch. In fact, we are still in the process of working with Alliant Energy and Sunvest to put the final design together to be able to incorporate some of the different agricultural research studies that are proposed for this area. But what you do see here is an example of a 2 megawatt, 2.25 megawatt project. So it gives you a sense of the amount of space that it would take up. And as we mentioned earlier, this particular parcel was targeted to minimize the impacts of any adverse impacts on the viewshed, to minimize those, to minimize interference with prime agricultural soils, and to be tucked away in one of the interior locations of the much larger plot. There are roughly 30 rows of panels here, each row extending for roughly 40 feet, I'm sorry, 400 feet or so. But again, the actual layout and design of the array is still a work in progress. Ben, if we could go to the next slide. There's some notes here on this slide about typical construction that you might see for an array of this size, a solar array of this size. A couple of important things to note here is that the solar panels that would be used here would have an anti-glare coating, and they would be south-facing panels that are fixed. There wouldn't be any moving parts as part of this project. And because they have that anti-glare coating, that would significantly reduce any likelihood of glare coming off of these solar panels and interfering with views or interfering with any type of driving or anything like that. As I've heard folks from Sunvest say on other calls, solar panels are designed to absorb solar energy and not reflect it. And so that's a key thing that we wanted to mention. The design of this project, as I mentioned earlier, is still in the process of being developed. However, we would keep the height of the project to be less than 14 feet to be consistent with local Town of Dunn solar ordinance. And then you can see some of the other aspects of this project. There would be no additional buildings that would be built for this project, no lighting that would be involved. There would be security fencing that would be required because we are building a power plant, a solar array there. But as you can see, there's maintenance and inspection that would be estimated at twice per year. But aside from that, there wouldn't necessarily be a lot of activity back and forth for this array, except for any activity associated with the agricultural research component of the project. Ben, if you don't mind going to the next slide. The last thing I wanted to mention here is a question that we've gotten in the past. This view this is a map view, and you can see in the bottom portion of the map, the yellow square represents the 15-acre parcel of the larger Kegonsa research campus that we are targeting for the solar array and the agricultural research. One thing that we wanted to mention is that the brown and green rows that you see going north from the yellow array, the brown road, the brown line that goes up to Schneider Drive, that represents a roadway that would be built in order to get access back and forth to the solar array. But one of the key things we wanted to mention is that at this point, the Alliant Energy folks are expecting that they will be able to connect to their substation, and at this point are expecting the ability to make an underground connection. And the indication is that they are planning to avoid any additional overhead wires as much as possible. Now, things can always change, and there may be things that come up that we're not expecting at this point. But again, at this point, with the best information we have, the folks from Alliant have said that their intention is to put an underground connection into their substation as much as they can. That substation, as this image indicates, heads up north. So you can see Schneider Drive and then heading up north to their substation, which is located a little bit off of this graphic. And as I mentioned, we do have representatives from Alliant Energy on this call, and we've been working very closely with them. We're very thankful for the collaboration with Alliant Energy and with Sunvest Solar for this project. Just to sum things up, I just want to say that this is a project that we feel has a lot of value to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It has a lot of value to our students, to our faculty, and to our stakeholders. We are very excited about this project because we think that it really is a great opportunity to marry up a clean energy portfolio with agricultural research. A project like this will be just one piece of our larger clean energy portfolio. We are doing projects on our main campus as well, and looking at other locations throughout the state of Wisconsin. I would invite anyone who's interested to learn more about our larger goals, our larger clean energy goals, to please contact me. I'd be happy to share more information with you at your convenience. But for the focus for tonight, we're very excited for this Kegonsa Research Campus project. Ben, why don't I hand it back to you? Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And just to let you know, any audience members here, there's many more figures and graphic elements to the draft environmental impact assessment report in the appendices. So feel free to download those from our website. Again, that'll be located at the end of this presentation. And you can see some of the other elements that we'll be presenting just a small snippet of tonight and some of the impacts element, but there's also further visuals associated with some of these, including a more broader scale map showing that distribution line route. As part of the WIPA process, it requires alternatives to be considered. Oftentimes these are in-depth analysis. Other times they're more modified assessments of where certain things are looked at. Typically, one of the alternatives that is always evaluated is a no action or defer project request evaluation. That would be what would happen if we did nothing here, or the project just did not go forward as presented here this evening. So as you heard Josh mention, it wouldn't meet some of the programmatic sustainability or alternative energy needs that the university has identified as key master planning and goal elements. But it would allow for continued 100% agricultural land use at the site. What you see now is a current rotated crops, I believe, by a lease. The land is currently leased to a farmer that grows crops for their use and development. Other alternatives, I just wanted to just generally illustrate that the project team did look at other alternatives, including locating at other UW-owned areas, either near or within the Kegonsa Research Campus. You saw the larger parcel areas, 280 acres, including north of Schneider Road. They looked at other locations that had greater visual impact. The topography varies in this area. There's some flatter areas, there's also steeper areas, and there's trade-offs for each of those project development scenarios. And then Alliant Energy, the program that this customer hosted program that this currently falls within is a 200 kW to 2.25 megawatt. So if you're going smaller or larger than this defined project limits, then they're going to have other scenarios and impacts associated with the permitting, interconnection, and possibly ownership of these, as well as possible setbacks. So just wanted to illustrate, these are further described in the report as well, but illustrate that other alternatives were considered, and ultimately what was the preferred alternative was what we're presenting here this evening. Again, the WIPA project process is just one small part of the overall project development. We expect to be concluded with our portion here in the next month or two. At that point, again, the Board of Regents will be voting whether to proceed with their approach on this project, but that doesn't negate all the other design, permitting, and interconnection elements of the project that will need to happen in the future. The design, permitting, and reviews are anticipated then, provided this project proceeds beginning the summer and fall of 2022. The interconnection design and equipment procurement would begin later this winter into early next year. Final permitting, conditional use approvals, conditional use permit approvals, interconnection agreement, and final design would continue on into early 2023, with construction starting in early spring of 2023. Substantial completion and commissioning then is anticipated to be fully commissioned and substantial completion by late next year. So with that as a backdrop, our scope of work was to identify the impacts associated with the proposed project as Josh outlined and as you've seen briefly this evening. I wanted to first highlight the visual impacts. Our project development our project team at Ayers Associates, landscape architects, have some visual modeling programs. And what these programs do is extrude the general vegetation and basically rough, as you can see, block elements of the buildings into three-dimensional objects. We then, like some of the video games my kids play, you can move the camera around and take various snapshots from this. So the model that you can see in the lower right corner is the vantage point that a little bit broader view from what Josh showed you with the array kind of in the center, the 30 rows of 400-foot long solar panels. And from that, we took various vantage points along this model and tried to demonstrate what the visual effects may be from these various vantage points. This particular image here, you can see the array very briefly in the background between the trees. It's kind of demonstrated by a black line that is horizontal in nature. And this is located approximately, a few hundred yards away in the neighborhood to the southeast of the project site. So you can likely see it from the western edge of this neighborhood, but it's fairly well screened at this stage. This location is from Highway 51, directly east of the project site. And there is a screened row of trees, and from this vantage point, it's nearly impossible to see the array through the current existing vegetation that's on the project site or in the project site vicinity. This is probably the most visible array of viewshed. This is from Schneider Road or Schneider Drive to the north. This is the same view blown up. These solar panels are bifacial, meaning that they are able to collect the residual reflective solar from the ground in snowy conditions or summertime conditions. So they are kind of a dark colored in nature. I'm going to go back one slide again. So this is kind of from the road, without the kind of the blow up or the higher resolution imagery here, but they are certainly visible. This is the backside of the array as they're tilted to the south. This vantage point is to the northwest of the array along Schneider Drive and Green Road. Again, there is a lot of screening from the existing trees at the site. And then this is the final imagery that we have prepared. So this is from the southeast of the project site along Green Road. There is a farmstead here. You can kind of see the representative silo on the right side of this image. And there is an area through the trees that you can certainly see the array. Again, you can see the slope of the topography from north to south. So it is kind of blanketing this particular 15-acre location, and you can see the southern half or so of the array, or a southern third of the array through this location. So that represented the visual aspects as modeled to demonstrate kind of what this might look like. The other elements are dictated through the WIPA process. So we look at physical effects. So this is a modification of existing row crops through the addition of solar array and the access drive. So these crops are very well likely to be replaced with various other crops or other types of vegetation. And the idea behind that change was that there'd be less modification than traditional photovoltaic arrays, which they typically are pollinator habitats as the preferred habitat choice. And that may be an option that is looked at various times or throughout the research of this site. Physical actions include construction actions, including the maintenance and possible decommission, and will not impact surface water, groundwater, or soil quality at the site. There are no delineated wetlands at the project site. The town of Dunn requirements do have setbacks to wetlands, and that will need to be effectively permitted and demonstrated at that time. And that may include site-specific wetland delineation at the project site. However, the Surface Water Data Bureau from the DNR, which is a tool that is kind of the initial review of the project site from the DNR's perspective, does have mapped wetlands shown, as well as wetland type soils. And you can see the vicinity of the project site to the wetlands to the south and southwest of the project site. And the buffers aren't shown, but they are outside the buffer areas as well with the initial layout of this proposed facility. So there is a possible short-term interruption, possibly with the physical science lab as they connect to this or do some interconnections, but these would be staged strategically and coordinated with that entity. There's also short-term emissions and noise during construction. The largest noise impact is going to be the pile driving, presuming that is the preferred foundation of choice for the array. There's no long-term effects expected based on industry sound analysis on similar projects. So there have been studies done with solar equipment, including the inverters and some of the other equipment there, and have found effectively that these are at a distance, certainly within the realm of the farmsteads and the homes within the area, that there's no anticipated effects from noise long-term. Biologically, there's no long-term adverse biological impacts that are anticipated. There's certainly temporary disturbance of flora and fauna during the construction. The DNR has a environmental review effort that is required as a permit a site like this. This effort has been coordinated as part of our process, and they have recommended some mitigating actions for potential fauna that may be in the area to further mitigate or minimize the impacts. So the crop scenario is expected to provide a better habitat for, as mentioned, either pollinators or other small animals or insects. And then there are no federally listed state endangered species either within the area known to exist or likely to exist based on the ERR response from the DNR. Social or cultural impacts. There are obviously construction always has an impact to traffic patterns and noise. The traffic is going to be accessed along Schneider Drive, and there's going to be a new constructed driveway to provide for staging and construction access for the project as it would be constructed. Agricultural land use would remain an agricultural designation long term, and then the social impacts include additional research opportunities for multiple UW programs, as Josh mentioned. The property values, industry studies under solar to date, and these are referenced in the report as well, if you'd like to review them, haven't demonstrated any negative property values. And then long-term beneficial use of clean energy. These offset the greenhouse gas production when factoring in alternative generation of electricity, and as well as even when factoring in the manufacturing and supply chain of solar. There's some, again, additional research elements or references in the report if you'd like to learn more about how those compare. Archaeological sites were evaluated as part of our research. There were no sites on the project boundaries. However, there are sites within the general vicinity of the project, and I'll show you a figure next that kind of overlays all these historical and archaeological elements onto one map. So this is a compiled map from the archaeological site inventory, the archaeological report inventory, and the architecture and historic inventory. The orange colored polygons there are the known archaeological sites within the project area. And you can see they're generally fairly plentiful along Lake Kegonsa there as habitat for historic peoples that use these areas as living or camping areas. The green polygons that are noted there are the archaeological report inventory. Those are sites that were evaluated, but they did not find any artifacts of note or any anything that bore further categorization into the inventory itself into the orange designation. And then the purple colored dots are historical buildings or buildings of a certain age that were looked at for potential impacts as a historical building or listing on National Registry. None of these purple dots were listed on the registry. I wanted to mention also, if there is any demonstrated cultural artifacts, those would be addressed appropriately. Oftentimes, an archaeologist is on retainer to assist with the next steps should any artifacts or any possible designations be found on the site during the ground disturbance activities. On the economic side, long-term income through lease payments to the UW. UW is also going to be owning the renewable energy credits for this. These are market-based credits that factor in basic companies buy these credits to offset their carbon footprint or point to their own commitment to renewable energies. And then the solar energy provides known long-term energy pricing compared to the volatile fossil fuel market that we're seeing today. So basically, the Lion Energy knows the price they're going to be paying for electricity production from this facility when they can lock this type of long-term energy pricing in versus the unknown of other electricity generating portfolio. Economic impacts. There's a statistical study that provides a multiplier effect in the state of Wisconsin, for every dollar spent, there's approximately $2 in costs that are leveraged for that for construction workers, both direct, indirect leveraged effect from the dollars spent on construction projects. And this last bullet here is a little tricky. I'll do my best to try to describe it. This is a small project in the context of an energy portfolio, and I believe Lion Energy references nearly 1,000 megawatts or 1 gigawatt of solar projects currently in various states of development at this stage. So if this is going to be potentially a part of a larger portfolio docket to be presented to and evaluated by the Public Service Commission for any type of rate impacts that would be borne by all the ratepayers for Alliant Energy, and that that portion would be very small. For example, if it was a 450 megawatt portfolio and this 2.25 megawatt facility would be less than be about 0.5% of that docket. So relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but certainly potentially measurable in a larger future element for ratepayers as a consideration. There are some short-term impacts of traffic patterns for construction delivery, installation, and the distribution line. They're going to be even directionally drilling or open cutting along the side of the road. Those have the potential to affect local traffic. And there is no established local parking as part of this project. Further utility impacts, possible short-term interruptions as mentioned to the Kegonsa Research Campus, short-term commitment to energy and resources, including fossil fuel consumption for construction and the equipment, and then construction of new electrical distribution and fiber optic lines to the project area. There is a length of new distribution line and fiber optic that does need to be installed for this. So this utility is not extension is not insignificant. So that relatively briefly were the main project impacts were identified. At this stage, I wanted to open this up for a public comment period. So our public comment here, this is a publicly facing process. We are required to solicit public input and identify any issues and concerns specific to the project. The design team is in attendance this evening, and we will categorize any comments tonight in writing and for further consideration in the design process and possible modifications or permitting elements to that process. And then any comments received tonight will also be captured and incorporated into the final EIA document. Comments to date have been generally received from the town of Dunn or neighboring property owners. There is a nearby owner who's concerned about visual and they're removing the agricultural land from production. The Wabisa Snowbirds Club is a snowmobile club in the area. There is a snowmobile route that traverses the western side of this proposed array, as well as the southern side as it travels through the area, and that may possibly be impacted as part of this project as well. And it was something that was commented on as part of our process. And then the height restrictions again were noted within some other comments from the town of Dunn that they do have a new solar ordinance that was developed relatively recently, requiring the total height of the arrays to be less than 14 feet. So at this stage, I will open this up for comments, and I guess I will stop sharing my screen here if we'd like to have a name and a face if possible, but if not, if you simply feel comfortable providing your name, if you're representing anyone and your comment, and we'd be respectful to provide the comments within a 3 to 4 minute time frame, so everyone may have a chance to comment. Upon completion of the comments, I'll open this back up with some final slides with my contact information and some of the project websites that you saw earlier. So with that, I guess if there is comments, I will, I don't know if I have a raise hand feature here, but I will try to direct traffic as best I can if someone would just want to jump in again with your name, if you're representing anyone, and what your comment may be.
Ben, it also might be good to have speakers' address so we know their proximity to the project site, as well as able to follow up with them with any further information.
Okay, thanks, Gary.
Hey, good evening. This is Kim Kurtzborn, and we live at 2048 Green Road. I appreciate the environmental impact study, and one of the things that I'm curious about, though, is you mentioned the life of the project, and I did not read any literature on this proposal about when the life of the project ends and the environmental impact of having I-beams in the ground, the underground cables and fiber optics that are going to be underground, and then also what happens to those solar panels, right? So if this is dismantled, then how, my understanding is currently those go to the landfill, and maybe that's old, outdated information, but I have to believe that those solar panels going into the landfill, much like wind turbines, is also not good for our environment. And that's a concern for me, as well as obviously the visual disruption of our view, because we are right up against that property.
As far as the lease arrangement, I don't know that
Ben, I can offer some information if that works. Okay. First of all, thank you for your comment. I appreciate you taking the time to attend tonight and understand that your property would be very close to this proposed project. So we appreciate your comment. So a couple of things. The life of the project, we are in the process of working out a lease term. That there would be an initial term of 25 years with options to extend the lease past that. Typical solar panels, industry standard is somewhere in that 25 to 30 year range, give or take. There's a lot of variables there, but 25 to 35 years might be a reasonable time frame to think about for project useful life here. At the end of the project, and part of the planning of the project is to completely decommission the project, and so that includes not only removing the solar panels that would be located at the project, but also removing the supports as well. So in the event that we choose to use I-beams, or I should say Sunvest Solar chooses to use I-beams to provide some of the racking for those panels, those I-beams would also be removed from the ground. And so the goal of the decommissioning of the project at the end of its useful life is to return that area to as close to a pre-project state as possible. You had also mentioned the fiber optics and the electrical distribution, and all of that would be buried and would likely stay buried. Certainly the area that is partly along that Schneider Drive stretch and then heading north to meet up with the larger electricity grid from there. So I'm not sure if there are any other folks from the project team that would like to share any additional feedback on the comments.
Yeah, do you mind if I take it for a minute? Yeah, so I'm just going to expound a little bit on, this is Andy Ehlert, Resource Development Project Manager with Alliant Energy. So just to expound a little bit on what Josh had mentioned, yes, at decommissioning, the goal is to remove all the fencing, all the above grade assets, the roadways, and basically like Josh had explained, it would be returned to agricultural purposes or research purposes, whatever the landowner chooses to do. In terms of the cabling, what we have found and what our environmental people have indicated that we will probably leave cabling that is installed below 3 feet in place, because what we find is, from an environmental standpoint, it causes more environmental impact to pull out a cable that is 4 feet or 3 feet below the ground surface than it is to leave it in place. Additionally, anything that's 3 feet below the ground surface is not going to impact the agricultural production if it's in fact returned to agricultural production. In terms of the solar panel lifespan, these panels typically degrade at about 0.5% a year. So if you figure in 25 years, they will still have useful life. So if this project is discontinued, what we would probably be doing right away, priority one, would be hopefully to donate these panels, because of course they've still got about 85% useful life. The second option, the most viable option, is to recycle them. There are recycling companies out there now recycling solar panels, and we will envision a market that over the course of 25 years, there will be a growing market for panel recycling. And then the third, most least desirable option would be disposal or landfill. So Kim, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And this is Steve Gridanis with Alliant as well. One more quick comment there. When Andy mentioned panel degradation, that's referring to electrical degradation, and that's normal for panels. That's not indicating that there's any bleaching or dripping or materials falling off. No, it's just the electrical degradation over time.
And Andy, would it be safe to assume then also any of the structural members, assuming that they're metal, would also be recycled if and when the array is removed?
Yes, yes. Yeah, the entire structure, the entire steel structure comes out of the ground. So basically it is pulled right out of the ground with a machine, rather than, I know there has been situations where people have asked whether or not the steel is cut off at a certain depth. No, the whole piece of pipe steel is pulled out of the ground, and yes, that's recycled.
I'm just going to venture a response as a representative of the university and say that, you know, it's our hope that we'll continue to use these as long as possible. And that, you know, even though we only have an initial lease term of 25 years with an option to extend, we would likely continue to extend that option and continue to generate electricity off these panels as long as we can. So there is obviously a lifespan to the panels themselves that we've heard about. And at some point in time, we may want to or need to replace the panels some X years down the road. But as we've heard, the materials can be recycled, and that recycling program will continue to grow over time as more and more people use solar panels. And we can actually recycle the materials or reuse the panels going forward.
Thank you, team, for clarifying some of the questions asked this evening. I'll be sure to capture some of these elements into the report as well. I know that we hadn't discussed some of these things even tonight that are being brought up. So appreciate the comments as well as the response. Are there any other members of the public tonight who would like to provide any feedback or comments on the project? Going once.
This is Bill Kurtzborn.
All right.
My concern is the height, the 14 feet. That's even going to be even higher than I expected. Looking, because I can see that field plain as day from my backyard, and a good part of it too. I would like that if you're going to have it, you know, the closest to the ground as you possibly can. I don't think, this is my opinion, I don't think you'll ever see I don't think I'll ever see any classes being held out there in agriculture, because we've had these solar panels up across the state for a long time, and I don't see any classes or, students out there studying and things. And I'm also concerned that the UW, or Alliant Energy, once the wires and everything are all buried in here, that they'll go to the town of Dunn and they'll say, well, we want to do the whole 280 acres in the solar panels. And then, we got that, you see that O'Brien site over there by Fitchburg, and you got that new one over there by the Dane County. And these things suck up a lot of space. I know they're talking up there by Cambria to put them underneath the windmills. That seemed like a better use of land than this prime agricultural land we have around here in town of Dunn. That's it. That's all I got.
Does anyone on the design team want to talk about any concepts of vegetative screening elements beyond what is currently existing there? I don't know that we've specifically talked about that, and I don't know if that's premature or not, but I know that that is something that's being incorporated at other sites like this.
Sure, I'll go first, and then I'd invite anyone else from the project team. Bill, I just want to say thank you for your comment, and again, appreciate you taking the time to give us your feedback. In terms of the height of the panels or the actual end design of the proposed array, we have yet to finalize any of that. At this point, the reference for 14 feet is sort of the highest that it would go, and it could be the case that it is less than 14 feet. But we're thinking that at this point it might likely be around that high, and here's why. The plan, the thinking with this agricultural research component is that we want to leave enough space underneath the arrays to be able to do some type of research, some type of soil research, research with vegetation. What types of plants might be the best types that could support pollinators or help replenish the soils, that type of thing. And so in order to allow for enough space to potentially put some small equipment from time to time, whether it's a small mower or just have some interaction underneath the panels. That's part of the thinking of potentially having them be in that range of height. But things we haven't yet fully designed the height of the panels or the spacing of the rows, or space between the rows of the panels and that type of thing. It's to your point about seeing students out there and seeing classes out there. You're right. There's probably not going to be a lot of students in classes running around out there because it is a power plant, a solar array, and we can't just have our undergraduates roaming around there. So the times that we would have students there would be times where we have qualified personnel associated with the university and with Alliant Energy to ensure that there is safety for anyone who might be in that area at the time. But there would be likely research happening even if there aren't people at the array all the time. That research would be long-term research to look at what is the quality of the soil and what types of impacts would different types of vegetative ground cover have on the quality of the soil, and how can we maybe get that soil even to a better state than it is now over time. That type of research would happen, and that would happen largely without people located at it. So So I think, you know, there's still time for us to decide and plan out that array. Are there other folks from the project team that have any feedback on any of that?
Josh, this is Gary. Can you talk a little bit about the faculty and the departments on campus that we've started talking to, and what other types of research? I know, you know, faculty obviously in the College of Ag and Life Sciences are very interested from an agronomy standpoint, as well as our landscape architecture friends, biology, botany, soil science, et cetera. But are there other programs and units that you've been reaching out to already from a research standpoint?
Yes, yeah. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so as you mentioned, our College of Agricultural Life Sciences is very interested in this. College of Engineering is also interested not only in in monitoring the performance of the panels over time, but also in potentially looking at different types of racking systems and potentially looking into different materials that might be able to be used that could support different configurations of solar arrays in the future. So College of Engineering, CALS, our College of Landscape Architecture is very interested, our landscape architecture programs. I should mention too that another group that we're talking with that is very interested in this is the La Follette program of public policy, because as you know, as we've identified here, you know, there are a number of projects that are proposed throughout the state of Wisconsin, and the forecast is for more of these projects to be proposed over time. Not necessarily our projects, but you know, other people's projects, and there's real tension out there between whether it's neighbors or municipalities or solar developers, and there's a lot of policy questions out there as well. And so our policy group is also very interested in looking at this example and seeing how there might be some opportunities to marry up those ideas of solar and research at the same location to try to make it a win-win as much as possible for the majority, for the greatest number of people.
Thanks, Josh. Again, this is Gary Brown. I just wanted to address Mr. Kurtzborn's question about future development of the 200 plus acres there at the Kegonsa site. We don't have current plans right now to expand the solar array. This is a pilot project for us in Alliant and Sunvest to see how it goes. There is lots of land out there, but we also want to continue our agricultural use there, and we're knowing that at some point in time, the Physical Sciences Lab and the Kegonsa Research Center may want to expand. So we don't have any timelines or any plans on that related right now, but as we think to the future of all of that land, we always keep the prime agricultural land in mind. That's why we've cited this particular array in the particular site that we've selected, down the hill, south facing, but also as much as possible off the prime agricultural lands as mapped by Dane County in the town of Dunn. And then we do have other agricultural properties around Madison that we may move to this site. We've been talking with our veterinary school and potentially moving their animals and their vet research program that is right now in the middle of the University Research Park on Mineral Point Road, that they could maybe potentially in the future relocate down to this area, and that we'll see if that actually happens or not. We've been talking about that for many years, but at some point in time, we need to move that program off the research park land. So, and this seems like a viable option for the agricultural research that's happening there. They do research on all kinds of animals from swine to sheep, horses, cattle, you name it. They do lots of research there through the vet school. And this would be a great place to have that as well. So.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet.
We like that option better.
I like that answer.
Well, that would potentially be to the north on our property north of Schneider Drive. We do like this idea, though, of really figuring out Is it possible to do agriculture in amongst these solar panels? And that's one of the biggest research questions that we're having, is how can we do this? How can we set up actually a really good precedent to harvest both sunlight, energy, and electricity, but also then harvest agricultural products underneath the panels? The O'Brien site down in Fitchburg actually does have pollinator landscapes underneath it. Great option. It actually does help rejuvenate the soil. Those plants, typically prairie plants and native species, actually dig down into the soil with very, very deep roots and actually help aerate the soil and bring water down into the soil. Unfortunately, agricultural use of our lands is really not very environmentally sustainable. I'm glad the farmers in the area rotate their crops. That's a great way of helping that as well. But over time, that soil does have some issues with it being used for agricultural use over and over and over. And then if you can actually introduce different types of vegetation, such as pollinator habitats, prairies, and those kinds of things, that actually helps rejuvenate the soil. So that's one of the research programs that we have faculty that are very interested in, is how do we make this a viable alternative and actually get dual use out of the property. You mentioned the view shed from your home. I know that the solar panels are actually well across the university property. So they're not, I don't believe, immediately adjacent to your property. From what I know, it's actually on the other side of the fence and the hedgerow that's there. But we would definitely be interested in looking to see if there's a way for us to do some additional vegetative screening at some time in the future.
Hi, this is Jeff McCarthy, Alliant Energy. I just wanted to comment that for this particular customer-hosted tariff, 2.25 is the maximum size that we can place per customer. So that will be the maximum for customer-hosted.
Thanks, Jeff. That's a good clarifying note as well. All right, I see everyone is back to mute. There's a few names that I don't recognize here, and unidentified caller number 2. I guess I'll open this up again to any final comments that folks may want to have answered, or questions answered, or comments you'd like to provide.
Ben, can we find out for the record who caller number 2 is, just so we have that for our meeting minutes?
Sure. So it looks like caller 2, I'm guessing you're on a phone line. If you can unmute yourself and provide a name to go with your handle here. Caller 2, you're on mute right now. There we go.
This is Ben Cullenberg with the town of Dunn.
Oh, hey, Ben.
Hi. Sorry, I got kids putting to bed right now, so I had a call on my phone.
No, that's perfectly fine. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess with that, do the auction style completion here, if you want to have any final words here. So going once, going twice. All right, I'm gonna share my screen again, and we will wrap up this evening. So again, the draft environmental impact assessment comment period concludes this evening. Feel free again to email me anything you'd like to have in writing tonight. Again, this is being recorded, so this is going to be hosted on our website, and I think UW offered to host this as well. Early next month, they will have a discussion on the lease with the Board of Regents, and presumably we'll make a decision if this is going to be within something that they want to continue to move forward with. The CAMPA WEPA officer, which is Gary Brown, will need to consider these comments and issue a recommendation to move forward with a final EIA, or whether to elevate this to an environmental impact statement. If it's EIS is not required, the final report and the finding of no significant impact would then be developed, likely later in April, and the process completed on the WEPA side at that point. And again, thank you so much for attending. I learned as I do in every one of these meetings, I learn something new myself, and appreciate the design team, the project site owner, the UW, and all of you for attending this evening. Great comments, and hopefully it will make for a better product at the end of this, should this continue to move forward. I will leave this final slide up here for another couple of minutes. If you'd like to jot down my contact information or any of these website addresses, the last one on the sustainability with the wisc.edu one, that is all one. It doesn't fit on one line, but that is all one long hyperlink. So thank you again, and that concludes tonight's meeting.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben, for running it.
Thank you.
All right, I think the rest of them are internal. So I'm gonna hang up now. Thanks, Josh, for all your help tonight. And Bill and Logan, thanks for sticking around.
Ben, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. And Logan and Bill, we'll catch up the next few days and compile notes and get some minutes developed here. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Good night, guys. Bye.